First time you and I met was actually at IndyVolved. I had just gotten elected to the council, so I got invitation to the reception. And I remember watching you talk about the work and learning about IndyHub and learning about IndyVolved and being like, holy cow, like, how do you get that job? That is the coolest job ever, so impactful and powerful.
Oh, gosh, that seems like just yesterday in so many ways, and probably like forever ago in a lot of other ways for you and me both. It, having the opportunity to work for Indie Hub was truly a dream. I'm not saying it was perfect, as you know, but getting to promote the city that you love and getting to work with an amazing team, and not to mention all the awesome people in our city was just, it's once in a lifetime opportunity.
We think about, we're coming up on our 15th anniversary, right? November 15th, 15th anniversary for the organization. And you were there at the very beginning. I mean, this was your baby for that 15-year period of time. So can you kind of just go back to where it all started? Like, what was the challenge you all were trying to solve all the way back in 2005?
I think the biggest problem we saw as we were doing research behind what this city needed to really engage and connect 20 and 30 somethings, it was that there was no hub, if you will, of for people to find out what was going on. But I think the bigger issue, and one that has been addressed time and time again, was just getting people to love our city and to advocate and promote it in a way that would encourage other people to come. At the time, we were relatively unknown as a large major metropolitan area, probably because we hadn't really reached that status yet. But we had all of the great pieces in place to get people here, and certainly with our corporate partners, that Lilly and Dow, and as well as our universities. But we needed to keep people here. We could attract great talent to go to school, but we needed to give them a reason to stay. And part of that reason, as we both know, because I lived it and you're living it now, it's getting people to understand the ins and the outs of this city so that they can feel really invested and excited about it.
It's interesting because when you think about what Indianapolis was in 2005 versus 5 years later, 10 years later, I mean, we really grew into an extraordinary city. So did the work get easier over time during your tenure?
I feel like it got easier in some respects, but the challenges, or rather the stakes, got higher. Certainly, goodness, Super Bowl, having a Super Bowl here was so exciting. We were going to be on a world stage. The Gosh, we go back and we think back to the last 15 years, all of the things that have happened to our city, in our city, mostly good, but occasionally the bad that put us on the world stage. Those were the opportunities that Indie Hub sought to place the 20 and 30 something voice front and center. And I look back and I think about the incredible opportunities we had then to do that. And now I just feel like that has exploded even more.
So obviously over the years, programs have come and gone, different ideas, kind of big, bold ideas. What were some of the first programs you put into place?
Well, Indevolved, I mean, how can we not mention that first? And what you all were able to do last month blew me away. So when I think back to our first Indevolved, and it was in the basement of the Murat, if you can imagine. There were 20 organizations, and I think we felt like we had 100, 150 people there. You all created a month-long event showcasing hundreds of organizations, and something that is also living online. So if you drop in to Indianapolis and want to get engaged in December, you can do that so easily. Um, Indievolved was certainly it's been such an exciting thing to watch grow and shape. people's civic engagement in our community. The second one that comes to mind is really Passport to the Arts. Um, in the early days, I think 2007, the Endowment and Arts Council of Indianapolis did a really great study looking at how people were using arts in Indianapolis, and specifically how newer patrons were using, newer meaning younger, and it was pretty atrocious. And there had been a great passport, or I guess sampler package that was out there, but working with the Arts Council, them actually handing us the keys and saying, you guys create something that's going to appeal to your audience, and watching that grow over the years. 2008, 2009 was a rough time for our country. Certainly the economic downturn, a lot of people lost their jobs, people weren't going to events. And so we worked with both local government as well as local experts in resume building and branding yourself and putting your best foot out there. And we were able to create something that really helped people who were struggling at that time. And so I think that those are the three that always pop into my head when I think about the things that we've been able to do that have really met people where they are and tried to expose them and or educate them to things in a way that maybe hadn't been done before.
You know, it's interesting the number of people I've talked to since coming on board who say that one of their first introductions to the city was a cup of coffee with you, or a cup of coffee with Ashley Miser, or a cup of coffee with anybody else on the team, and that it was this kind of special, like, welcoming committee moment, right? And so, you know, when I came on board and I was learning more about that piece of it, which has had different names over the year. It was, I think at the beginning, it was probably just having a cup of coffee to get to know the city, and we called it Core Connections. And we think about it, what really is onboarding to our city. It's giving you kind of an on-ramp to being a part of our community. How important was that from the beginning all the way through the time that you were leading the organization?
I mean, if I had $1 for every cup of coffee, right? Don't you feel like
Instead of
that?
having spent $1 for every cup of coffee.
Exactly. I am a highly caffeinated person, and I owe that all to IndyHub. Um, you know, I think this is something that is truly built in Indianapolis's DNA, and that's to be a personable place where people feel like it doesn't matter where you went to college or high school, if your parents are from here or not, which mine are not. I did not grow up in Indianapolis. Um, you can still make a difference, and you can build a life and create a community for yourself here in a way that I think really doesn't exist, at least according my very unscientific my unscientific experience with other people in other cities. But I do think that's something it's just embedded in our city's DNA, that you sit down with someone across the table from them, look them in the eye. Maybe right now it's virtually, you're looking somebody in the eye, but you are um, really connecting in a different way. And I think our our shared colleague Ashley Miser, I remember the first time that she went out and did this so clearly. It was, I mean, when she came back, she's like, that was just magic. I mean, being able to connect someone to either another person that has a shared interest that you know of, or connecting them to an organization, a nonprofit organization, maybe it's a new job. And really, that was another role that IndyHub served that we didn't expect it to serve, was this matchmaker of sorts between individuals, and I mean this in a professional sense first and foremost.
But
Although there
sometimes
was,
romances, I think, have come along as well. So
I know of several weddings. I didn't get invitations, but I am not upset about that. But I do think that, just having that, being able to bear witness to people finding things that make them happy, or people that make them happy, is a really special, special opportunity.
Well, I remember looking at some of the early research that you all did, even as I was kind of trying to get up to speed on everything. And this idea of 90 days, right? These first 90 days being really, really critical. And what a powerful thing to do, to say in your first 90 days, we invite you to sit down with someone who's going to authentically and intentionally help you get plugged in. I mean, that's just pretty special. And to your point, you don't see that. I mean, a lot of other cities. In fact, at this point, I only know of maybe one or two other cities that even think that way.
Right. Yeah. And, in this present day and age where we can't be across the table from someone as safely as we used to be able to, I think we realize how unique, even more unique it is for our city, as well as for the role that IndyHub plays in making sure that these connections happen, not just once or twice, but regularly.
We've been talking for like 10 minutes here, and obviously it's very clear. IndyHub has always been about people, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it is the center of our work. Everything revolves around it. Do you have any just fun memories of people along the way, and the role the organization's played for them?
You know, there are so many stories, and I think we touched on the weddings, and some of those couples that met at an Indie Hub event or volunteering together now have added to the population of Indianapolis. Even those are, again, super special moments. I think one, I could go through a million different programs, and also well, maybe a million's a little bit of a stretch, but a variety of different programs and participants in those programs. But I think when we, and I still use we, because I'm so proud of what you and the team have done that I sometimes just I forget. But when we're able to showcase our contemporaries who are leading in other ways, and I would definitely highlight Molly Chavers, worked with Indie Hub several years ago to have a conversation on race. I mean, this has been many years ago now, but I think about how few conversations were happening then, and how we started to normalize that. When I started to see more women featured in not just our panels, and people of color too, but when I started to see that becoming the norm, it had always been super important to us to make sure that we're showcasing our contemporaries, but also making sure that there are diverse voices, and diversity in all forms. That excited me, and I'm not saying we were first to the table for that. We were informed by a lot of smart people on our board, and a lot of smart people around our city, but it really was, it's one of those things when we were all able to work together to do that. I think back to our 1828 classes too, our leadership program that Michael Kaufman brought to the board several, um, gosh, 2010, 2009. How do there's so much focus in corporate America on showcasing their own, or giving young leaders education or connections. How do we do that for non-traditional employees in our city? And even that program I know has shifted and molded over the years, but the conversations, the real and thoughtful words that are spoken, the truth that's spoken by those participants, I learned so much. And those are things that I'll never forget. Ever.
These last couple years of 1828, we've kind of early in the program had the class share what they want the city to look like in 10 or 20 years. And it's just been extraordinary, because I think, there's so much possibility when we actually start listening to this generation of leaders, right? And I think that's what's so cool about IndyHub is we've spent so much time, building that megaphone, and it's paying dividends. I mean, you think about transit, and the role you all played at the time in pushing that message and showcasing that for this generation, for 20 and 30 somethings who are choosing what city to live in, the absence of effective transit was a deal breaker.
Absolutely. It absolutely was. And, I think, again, to that first ride we were all able to take on the EB on the red line a couple of last summer. It feels like a couple of summers ago.
Yeah.
Um, whenever, but think about all the work that so many people put into that. Not to mention people in government and in other organizations that were all working together. And again, in this uncertain time, um, seeing people work together is really special. On that note, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
So, I mentioned that we had some down points during my tenure, but in my 15 years or my 13 years, I never saw days like I'm seeing today. How are you all handling this? And first and foremost, I want to just say how proud I am when I watch from the sidelines, seeing the way that you all pivoted to make people, um, you know, keep people connected. But how are you all doing? And give us a little insight into what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a wild year, and it's interesting. So even before the pandemic, and you were talking about this when you were leading the organization too. Loneliness is something we worry about, right? And in 2018, a study from Cigna Health, laid out pretty clearly that half of Americans feel lonely some or all the time, right? And almost half feel that their relationships aren't meaningful. And so before this happened, the public health crisis that we were starting to narrow in on is that the loneliness epidemic and what a social recession might look like. So as we were having those conversations, I don't think we ever would have imagined that those ideas would be kind of propelled to the forefront of everybody's minds, right? Because what we see now are people that are really struggling with loneliness, that are really feeling isolated. And so it was March, and we sat down as a team and said, what do we do about this? I mean, it is more important than ever before that we are getting people connected and involved, and feeling like they have a role in shaping the future of the city. And so it started with digital book clubs, right? We were like, okay, this is something kind of small and easy, sort of. It ended up being, a little bit bigger undertaking, that we could get people together to have meaningful conversations, build new relationships. And of course, it's sold out, right? I mean, we were filling 20, 25 spots per book club, one after the other. And that's something we're still doing now. And then it was, how can we do partner with some other organizations and do an evening dinner party, right? So we did that. And then was, how can we continue to make sure folks feel like they know what's happening in the city, even if we can't get them together? And so we launched into these virtual conversations, and partnered with organizations like Innovative to take it to the next level. And I think at the end of the day, for us, it was just trying to still create pathways of belonging, even when that wouldn't be the easy thing to do. And as you mentioned with IndyVolve, coming into September, right? I mean, what was usually and has been quite successfully a single day event, we recognized there was so much more to do. I mean, nonprofits were struggling. They couldn't find volunteers because of the circumstances. Revenue was down. And so we needed to devote as much possible bandwidth as we could to helping them out too. And I think it's funny, as we've wrapped up IndyVolve now, and as a team, we've kind of looked back on these last 7 months, recognizing there's still a lot more work to do. It's kind of mind blowing. I mean, time has flown by. But we've reached more people than ever before too. I mean, I think thousands and thousands and thousands of people have engaged with us in one way or another. We've gone from 45 experiences we hosted last year to, I think by the end of the year we'll be at 180. I mean, so in a time when I think the natural thing to do might have been to push pause, to regroup, to figure out how we were going to weather the storm. Even if I wanted to do that, the team wasn't going to let that happen. And it was, no, we have to double, triple, quadruple down because we're needed more now than ever. And I have felt that way. I mean, this has been an opportunity to give back in a way that I could have never fathomed. And it's been extraordinary. It's been really, really rewarding.
Oh, well, again, as I said, it is. I I don't. I never expected that I'd be disappointed with seeing how you all took the rein. You took the reins and led this great, amazing team. But I've just been astounded by the work, and also by the way that you have again, you see something that is not happening and you find a way to make it happen even in the worst of times. So I'm really, really excited for what is to come for Indie Hub.
It's striking to me that over the last 15 years, 14 of which you were in charge, the goal was always to make this low barrier, right? So even the organizations somewhat similar to IndyHub around the country, I mean, there is a cost of attendance, right? I mean, you are paying to participate in extraordinary programs. Um, why was that so important? I mean, and I think, in the reality of it, if we're being completely honest, is that makes it way harder to sustain. But
Yes.
this has been a part of our core value. It continues to be a part of our core values. Why, from the very beginning, was that key to the organization?
Well, and it. I think back to my early days here in Indianapolis, and I won't tell you exactly when, but let's just say I'm celebrating a birthday in November as well. So it's, it is one of those. It was one of those things that even though I graduated from college, I was living on my own for the very first time. My parents aren't too far away, but it was still pretty clear, hey, you're on your own now, sister. Um, I was working two jobs to make ends meet. By day, I got to work kind of my exciting passion, working in state government. And then at night, I got to work for clothes at Banana Republic. So that's basically the way things went. And I just I'll never forget the things that I felt like I couldn't do because I was trying to make ends meet. And I joke when I say working for clothes, but it I needed both of those jobs to make ends meet. And um, I had I had a lot of friends who were in school at the time, right out of college, and that's the time too when you have the most free time. You are probably missing your friends from college and the things that you did very easily on college, whether it was getting involved with student government or different clubs or athletics. And that was that I always go back to that Molly who would really have loved to have maybe joined the IMA, maybe been more active with CCA sports, or perhaps, had gotten a little brother, a little sister, or participated in some mentorship program. First and foremost, I didn't know those things were there because I couldn't find them as easily as you can find them today. But second of all, I think time and money would have been a big prohibitor for me to be able to participate. And so I think the role, again, I'm making this about me, but I see that over and over and over again in people's situations. Second, and I think much just as equally as important, but very important to kind of our working together ability, we wanted people who had a little bit of extra income to be able to give to organizations that matter to them or to join an organization perhaps that so they could be a part of Indie Hub as well as X, Y, and Z Club. And so, you know, when you're starting out as a college graduate, high school graduate, you're working your way through a master's program or a PhD, whatever it is, you should, whatever available resources, time and money, you should still be able to find that time to give up to yourself too, and to create connections and also invest yourself in this place.
Okay, so coming up on 15 years, pretty remarkable anniversary and a pretty remarkable time in our city's history. I'm sitting here. I'm like I said, always trying to fill your shoes. Where do you hope this organization is going over the next 50 years? What's your advice? What's your encouragement? Where do we need to be headed?
I think about the thousands of people you all touched this year and how that will reverberate for generations to come. So I most certainly know that you made the case for somebody to stay here when they had a job offer elsewhere. I am 100% certain that you created a friendship circle that would not have existed otherwise. And who knows what will happen with that, how those people will be able to support one another. Um, Relationships of all kinds, of all shapes and sizes. And also, again, you've given people hope during a really hard time. And I think that that in its own right, we'll look down the road, and this will be something we'll all talk about to our grandchildren or our friends. And, who knows what, you know, Indie Hub might never get mentioned. I find that happening sometimes. but but it will be the connection that Indie Hub made to someone else that really helped make somebody's life a lot better. How about
The
you?
number of people, yeah, the number of people who've reached out to us just in the last several months to share what it's meant. I mean, there have been days, the team we've put in 12, 14, 16-hour days, especially leading up to IndyVolved or when we were doing Camp Indie Hub this summer, and those are long days. That's never easy, right? No matter what kind of lifestyle you've got, those are long days. But we'd sit down and someone would share something they'd heard from a participant, or someone would pull up on the screen an email or a text message from someone, and you just go, okay, that fills the tank up enough to fire on all cylinders for another 2 weeks and another 2 weeks. But I think when we think what's next, right, I think the recipe, the initial recipe was so good, right? And if it really is about making sure people feel like they belong from the moment they set foot in the city, if it's about making sure that, once you're here, you want to stay and you want to leave your mark, I think everything we do has got to continue striking those chords. And so while I think, just as over your 14 years, programs change and things kind of shift and move to meet the moment, we recognize that we've got to stay nimble. And at the end of the day, if it stays at our center, what we talked about earlier, that it's about people and it's about who's here, then that's gonna be what we need to be doing.
Sounds like a perfect plan. And I can't tell you how excited I am to see what's next, but also how proud I am of you and your entire team for all the hard work that you have done so far this year and will, I know, continue to do this year. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I am forever grateful to have the shot to do this job now, and I hope as soon as all this is over, we can get together and reminisce a little bit more.
I would love that over some coffee.